Welcome to PM Express Business Edition. The Ghana Statistical Service has begun an exercise to actually, maybe in layman terms, count everyone in this country. But how is the counting going to be done? And what will be the cost of this counting? What will be the impact of this on the economy and even businesses? And as we speak, some may say that some people know the size of this country or the population. So why don't we just extrapolate things? Apart from government, does anyone else need this data? All these issues wrapped up on PM Express Business Edition as I engage government statistician Professor Samuel Kobnenim as we talk about the population and housing census. Well, we'll take a short break and we'll be right back. Welcome back to PM Express Business Edition as we look at counting the population and its relevance to the larger economy and even the business community as well. Why should we care about this whole population and housing census if I manage a staff strength of maybe about 400 when it comes to planning? And what about the bigger and the larger economy? Well, I'll say that I'm so grateful to have government statistician Professor Samuel Kobnenim with me here in studio. And I'm so grateful, sir, because getting this appointment with you last week, my fear was that you may end up not making it, but you made it, and I'm so grateful, sir.
Thank you, George.
And how are you doing? I mean, I had an experience with you last week, and I knew the things that you had on your table, but how are you managing it? How are you managing?
It's really a tough exercise. As we are all aware, it's a decennial activity, and you would always want to make sure that you get things right. But having a very good supportive staff around me and having the international community around me, I think we are managing the stress and we're looking forward to an exciting 2021 population housing census.
Do you get the sense from all your staff people that, listen, we need to get this right and therefore we don't mind? Just like how our joy here, when we were covering the elections, people were willing to sleep in the office and all those things to make sure that, listen, we can't get it wrong with this exercise.
Indeed, that is the general sense that we have as an institution. And again, we're taking advantage of this decennial activity to rebrand the service. And once we lose this opportunity, it's going to take us another 10 years to have such an opportunity to rebrand the image of the service. So it's really a collective approach to ensuring that the census is a success.
You're taking it easy, right?
We are.
So as we speak right now, Prof, help me out. Where are we right now? Or even before we get to where are we right now? I mean, way back in my econs class 101, we talked about population and housing census, but why population and housing census?
So let me give a bit of history to that, in the sense that prior to 2000, we were doing only a population census, and through other surveys, we were getting information on housing. So for our 1960, our 1970, and 1984 censuses, they were all population censuses. But from 2000, 2010, and the upcoming 2021 population housing census, we are putting population and housing together to get a composite census exercise. And the rationale from our point of view is pretty simple. You want to understand the living patterns, the living arrangements of persons. You want to understand how you're going to govern the people that you have in the country. So the only way you can understand their living conditions is to get a sense of where they live and in which structures they live in, to get a better understanding of how that environment influences their behavior. So to get a complete sense of a complete understanding of the characteristics of the persons, one of the things that we need to do is to get their living arrangements in addition to their characteristics.
And that would shape policy formulation and all, because I'll be coming into deep into that. So help me out again. What vehicle or what is your approach? Because some would say that, okay, Prof, I mean, in my house, I know the number of people there. I can just send a number to you via WhatsApp, put it together, and then voila, you're done. What is the process being used this time around to capture this data? I mean, way back in school, even trying to count people, it's another thing altogether. With technology, changing human approach, what vehicle is being used to capture the population in Ghana here?
So I'll look at this from two perspectives in terms of the thinking around the organization of the whole exercise and the tools that we are using to conduct the exercise. So in terms of thoughts around the whole exercise, we are open to different approaches, but we are always guided by which approach would help you standardize what you are doing, which approach would help you compare what you've done in the past, and which approach would help you compare what is being done in other jurisdictions. Anytime you're talking about statistics, one of the things that you need to look at are the two things that I've talked about in terms of standardization and comparability. So over the period, what we've done is to choose the approach where we say, we just need a snapshot of the population that we have in the country. As you alluded to, one can say that let's start counting the number of people that we have in our respective households. But the question is, what is the definition of a household to start with? And if you are counting, what would be the basis of saying, I'm including person A or I'm excluding person B? So for that reason, we are saying that anytime you're doing a population housing census, from the perspective of counting, we are adopting what we call the de facto approach, which simply means that we are looking out for all persons who spent who would spend 27th night in the country. That is one approach for counting the population. And that is what enables us to compare it with what we've done in the past and also what is happening in other jurisdictions. In addition to that, our questionnaire allows us to look at it from other perspectives in terms of usual members of households who are absent for the 27th night. So be it somebody has traveled outside, be it internal migration or outside the country migration, we get information on that provided the external migration is within 12 months period. Given that this is our first digital census, and when we say that what drives it is the use of tablets in the data collection, it gives us an opportunity to really identify people based on the dates that we automatically capture as a result of the exercise. So once we finish the data collection, we are able to know that when did the data trickle in because of the tablet that we are using, whether the area that we demarcated for the person, the enumerator, whether indeed the enumerator worked within that area. So these are the technologies that we are putting in place to ensure that we don't leave anyone behind, for which reason we do listing of structures ahead of the counting exercise, and more importantly, we avoid duplicates. And using the de facto approach, that is the 27/9, enables us to ensure that we don't have duplicate, because even if you are a usual member in another locality, the key question is, where did you spend the census night?
Well, why is it, and help me out, why is the census night so critical in when it comes to counting of a population? Because I know that, again, if you go back to economics, the GDP, Ghanaians living here and Ghanaians living outside and taking all those things. So why is that also critical, that what we've talked about, the census night and the number of persons within a particular geographical location? Why is that very important here?
It remains important from the perspective of counting, and I'm going to stretch the discussion beyond the counting. And as I indicated earlier on, you want to avoid duplicates. So what you want to do is you want to take a snapshot of the population. So you want to get people to say that this night I was here and I'll be counted where I was the 27th night. So for instance, if your usual place of residence is in Greater Accra and 27th night you spend it in some other region other than Greater Accra, you'll be counted where you spend the night. If you don't do that and you open up in terms of where do people regularly stay, where do people usually stay, then you run the risk of double counting people. So the essence or the main reason why we make reference to the census night is all counting should be based on where you spend the night, and then would count you based on that. So for that reason, we've identified 5+1 target groups that we go in to look out for when we are doing this exercise. That is people who are going to spend 27 nights in a household, people who are going to spend 27 nights in a stable institution. And what we define as stable institution is an institution where at the time of entry, your exit is predetermined, it's for a longer period. The third category is also institutions, and this is related to people who are spending the night in institutions that at the time of entry, your exit is not predetermined, it's relatively short, like ourselves and our hospitals. And the fourth category are people who are going to spend the night in hotels. We have the fifth category that, in that case, the counting is done starting from the 27th night, which is our floating population. It is critical we start that 9th because this would reflect people who are in transit, people who are homeless. So once we are celebrating the 27th night, where we're going to find these people, we enumerate them at that point. And these are the places where they're going to spend the 27th night. Because once you miss them, given that it's potentially a mobile population, they're going to move from one area to another. So that is a vehicle by which we ensure that no one is left behind, and also we avoid duplicates in that process.
So if a certain Kobna Mensah is at East Legon, on 27th night he ended up in a hotel, Hans Cottage in Cape Coast, this approach would ensure that Kobna Mensah is not counted when your enumerator goes to his house at East Legon that night, and also counted again at Hans Cottage on the 27th June.
Indeed.
So
Indeed.
More of avoiding double counts, in some may say.
Indeed. Yes.
Let's look at where we are right now in terms of this whole process, because I understand that it's more of a process than just an event. So as we speak right now, where are we?
Today marks the 4th day of the training of our enumerators and supervisors. As you are aware, Monday, the 1st of May 2021, we brought together all our enumerators and supervisors, did the registration, and provided them with the materials that they need for the exercise. And teaching started on Tuesday, the 1st of June 2021. So today is the 4th day that we've been engaging with our enumerators and supervisors. This exercise is going to run to the 11th of June 2021. We have a 1 day in between the end of the training exercise and the start of the listing structures. When we talk about listing of structures, all that we mean is that we comb around the entire country and ensure that structures at different levels of completion are chalked, and they are chalked in such a way that you don't miss any structure in the country. And as I indicated, these structures are at different levels of completion. Once these structures are chalked to ensure that we don't miss any structure, we go back and take basic information on these structures, i.e. the type of structure, the level of completion, the use of the structure, and also take some basic information on the households that are in those structures, i.e. the name, the contact person of the household in terms of the head of the household, and basic information on number of females and number of males in the household. This would also enable us to put a check on the final value the final number that we're going to get as our population when we start the actual enumeration.
So can we say that we are about 60% through, 70% through with respect to what we've done so far, or the work itself is yet to start?
Indeed, the work itself is yet to start. As I indicated, the training started on the 31st. Prior to that, we had done a demarcation exercise. We were trained, our masters, national and regional trainers. But the bulk of the work, or the challenge of the work, is really when you start engaging over 76,000 persons. You put them in 2,000 classrooms in the whole country. And once you are done, you need to identify which area is suitable for them for enumeration, because at the time of recruitment, we ensure that, or we're guided by the fact that enumerators should come from specific localities for purposes of identification and for purposes of the language that they speak. So once we are done on the 11th, we need to ensure that these enumerators and supervisors are placed in the right localities where they can be identified and they can also speak the language. Then from the 13th, we're going to start with the listing of structures, which will run to the 27th of June 2021 when we celebrate the census night. Then from the 28th of June 2021 to the 11th of July, we're going to do the actual enumeration.
This is a very tedious exercise. How do we also ensure that we get the right persons to undertake this exercise?
This is a very important question, George, and we were guided by that 2 years ago, and that informed the development of an enumerator bureau. And right from the start, we said to ourselves that for the first time in the history of our data collection undertaking, let us move away from the ad hoc procedures where at the time of data collection, we bring people in and say that train you for 10 days, 14 days, and we put them out for the data collection. And having thought about that and having developed the enumerator bureau, as at the 3rd week of April 2021, which had the enumerator bureau run for a 2-year period, we had been able to mobilize 233,000 persons in this enumerator bureau. And we went through the process of ensuring that they have all the documentation that would allow us to do the various stages of screening. So the first stage of screening was to look at the exhaustiveness of the documents that they had submitted, i.e. their certificates, their pictures, and evidence of their experiences, and so on. So this is the rigor that we went through to arrive at 206,000 applicants as at the third week of April 2021. And then we did in-person interviews of all these persons. This was not done at HQ. This was done at the district level, superintended by the district coordinating directors, to ensure that persons that we recruit do not only have the qualification and experience, which we had checked during the desktop screening, but indeed persons that we're going to recruit are people who are identified in the locality by the district coordinating, the district census implementation committee members, and also persons who can speak the language to ensure that the translations that we're going to do would not adversely affect the data collection process. Once they had done the interviews and scored it, they sent it back to the headquarters for us to look at whether the distribution is right in terms of all localities have been covered, and whether the interview process, based on the numbers that we're getting, we did not observe any skewness or any bias in one direction or the other. Once this was checked, we sent it back for them to verify whether it's consistent with what they sent to us. Then they went ahead to invite these applicants, that is the selected applicants, for the training to start on Monday. So from the 206,000, we have put in the classroom 76,500 that we currently engage in.
But some would say that, and I believe that if you're still going out to engage these people as in the counter, with all the technology that is available for us, why are we still doing the in-counting? I mean, is it still as in the approach in getting this data? As I said, that maybe Joy FM, I know we about maybe this 300, let me put in for you. Why is this approach that you're adopting of going out to count people's homes, they have dogs, all the risk and all the rest that the people be exposed to? Why that approach and not all the other basic technologies that we can use?
So I see this question in two phases. One has to do with the approach, and the other has to do with what we seek to get out of the approach that we are using. So in terms of the approach, you are right in the sense that in other countries, they are not going by the in-person enumeration. They are either using the telephone-based interview, they are using the online-based interviews, they are using other mechanisms, specifically the administrative data process of counting people. And this is predominantly observed in the Scandinavian countries. Let's keep in mind that 2010, we were using the paper-based approach, and in 2021, we are using the CAPI, that is the personal interviews, the use of tablets. And definitely we aspire that in the next 10, 20 years, we would have drifted away from
telephone approach?
Or online approach, or, I mean, our goal as Statistical Service is to eventually go to the administrative data collection once we are able to strengthen our administrative system. But George, we need to appreciate what it takes to use these technologies that we are talking about. So for instance, for us to have a telephone interview system or an online-based interview system, we need to ask ourselves whether all the questions that we collect based on the in-person interview can easily be collected. So for instance, for the first time, we are taking data on GPS coordinates. A number of the questions that we asked are based on observations, and to what extent have we standardized these things across the country to say that we can allow people to self-respond to the instrument. Until we get our addresses system well structured, standardized across the country, until we are in the position where individuals can observe certain things and take some decisions on by themselves by reading our 323-page document that walks us through the key concepts and the key definitions. Until we are able to get to that point where we can do these things by ourselves, I don't think we are there yet as a country. So what we need to begin to think about is the factors prerequisite for us to use the different approaches that are being deployed in other countries. The second part of your question that has to do with what we seek to get out of the exercise that we are doing. And one will say that we could easily go by identifying, getting people to say that in my household we are 5, another person
20.
says we are 20,
50.
an institution says that. It defeats the whole idea of standardization over the period, because the basis by which we are going to do that would not have been established. So you would be using a different denominator and another household would be using another denominator. Having said that, it is important we clear the misconceptions around census undertaking. Census undertaking goes beyond counting. The reason why we do censuses is to update our socio-demographic characteristics, update our knowledge on the economic activities that we have in the country, update our information on housing and sanitation activities. So beyond the counting of persons that has dominated the media in terms of why we do censuses, we have 127 questions that we ask across 11 different modules on issues that are critical to our development. And these are the things that I've talked about. We have a module on literacy and education. We have a module on economic activities. We have a module on persons with difficulties in performing activities, a module on fertility, a module on mortality, a module on housing, and a module on sanitation. And these are the modules that gives us the 127 questions that we're going to ask people on. So it is not just about counting persons, but it is the updating of our socio-demographic characteristics, economic, housing, and sanitation database.
So for you, this is quite critical, and you think that is very, very important. I mean, let's come to the cost as well. Almost $500 million or more than that. I read certain comments on the internet, and some are saying that in the COVID times and all the rest, we don't need this exercise. What do you tell people who are making this argument?
I am pretty straightforward with my position on this matter, and I start by saying that our development is yet to get where it has to be, partly because of the lack of data that we need to get the development that we have. We need to have. And from my point of view, this is the only opportunity that we get in now in 10 years to update ourselves on the characteristics of the persons that we have in this country. Yes, we have done projections since the 2010, which puts our population at 24.6. And if you go on our website, based on the projections, we are saying it's 31.6 million. There are very good reasons why it is recommended that if you stretch the intercensal period, it should not go beyond 10 years. First reason, you are using at best 3 indicators to inform your population projections. So once you do a population census, let's say the 2010 population census, you use fertility, mortality, and migration theoretically to project your population to the 10th period. Unfortunately for us as a country, we've been using only fertility and mortality because of the weak data on migration from administrative sources to do our population projections. By the 5th to the 10th year, the robustness of these 3 variables, that is fertility, mortality, and migration, would have weakened. Think about it. In 1960, our fertility rate was about 6.7, and now in 2010 census was about 3.8. So if you, what fertility are you going to use, especially when the data is coming from surveys that are done every 5 years or every 6 years, every 7 years? So by the 10th year, the indicators that you use in projecting your base population would have lost its reliability. And that is why after the 10th year, you need to go in to ensure that you count persons, and moving forward, you are able to do that. George, it's also important to say that the population projections is unable to project the other indicators that I've talked about. So you cannot project persons with difficulties in performing activities. You cannot do projections in the area of economic activities and so on and so forth, using only fertility, mortality, and migration. These are other socio-demographic and economic variables that rely on some base indicators other than fertility and mortality. So you can definitely not continue to do projections if you want to understand the persons that you have in a country.
I also want to come back. So you put in a budget, right? You got all that you wanted, or you didn't get all that you wanted?
We put in the budget. Let me give a bit of history to it. Prior to COVID-19, the budget for the census was 477 million Ghana cedis. The budget has moved from 477 million Ghana cedis to 0.3 million Ghana cedis, principally because of the response to COVID-19 and the attendant restrictions that comes with it. So that is where the difference is. We had funds mobilized for the 477. We knew where that funds was going to come from. That funds was secured. When it went up to 521, we've engaged with government, and part of that resources has already been given to Ghana Statistical Service. And indeed, we have received that assurance that the difference will be made up, at least if not before the data collection. Once we finish the data collection and we need to expand on dissemination, at least for the release of the first provisional results, funds will be made available for us to do that.
You think there's not too much? Some will say that. Some say it's too much.
It is important we put the question of isn't it too much in a context. And I start from three perspectives. One is, what is the comparator in terms of what other countries are spending on census? Kenya just did its census with a population of about 47 million. They spent about 180 million US dollars. That puts the per head unit cost for the census at close to $4, precisely 3.8. United Kingdom is currently doing its census, over 900 million, with a population of 67 million. If you work out the maths, it comes to something approximately $19 per person for the census. The United States, if you look at their census in 2010, they were looking at $115 US per housing unit. If you take an average household size of 3 to 4, that is coming about 28 US dollars. If you look at our case, where in 2010 we used 70 million for 24.6 million people, the unit census cost was about 2.89 US dollars, and this time around with 31.6 million, approximately 90 million US dollars, is coming to about 2.84 per person for the census exercise. So indeed, one would have to ask, what would be the basis to say that it is too high or it is too low? I stretch the argument beyond the per person cost, and I say to myself that this decennial activity at the minimum is going to give us as a country about 2.6 million indicators. If you divide this by the 521.3, you're getting less than 200 Ghana cedis for an indicator that will save lives. So what are we putting premium on in saying that something is too expensive or otherwise? So we just need to look at, one, what is happening in other jurisdictions; two, what has happened in the past; and three, what we are getting out of the exercise. And from my point of view, we really are not spending that much into the census exercise, especially when we want to look beyond. In the case of United Kingdom, they are spending that much money, in excess of 900 million, because, as I indicated, they've started already investing in the drift away from traditional modes of doing census and using this census as a basis to move into more contemporary ways of collecting data. And that is why they started investing at this stage.
I was reading a comment on social media, and somebody was like, George, you know, I mean, we need money. Give the money to us. We'll count ourselves and bring the data to you.
I mean, I read that as well, but yeah. I mean, I would say it's a bit unfortunate, because yes, it might come in handy for somebody to say that you can do that, but it would definitely be short-lived. We would never be able to do even a medium-term planning if we don't know the characteristics of the persons that we have in the country.
How are we, so now that you've gotten your budget, I believe that all the persons that are going to count to be getting all their money, so we have a situation where someone say, I've not been paid, I'm not going to do this, anything that will compromise the process when it comes to giving these people their monies?
I can give that assurance that monies for field officers, we've already ring-fenced that, and once the exercise is done, we're going to give whatever is due them to them. It's important to emphasize that if the data collection ends, there are certain requirements that we expect from these field officers, i.e., given that it's a technology-driven census, we expect that the data that they are going to collect should sit with us, should satisfy some basic accuracy conditions and completion conditions prior to their last payment. So once this is done, and we've given ourselves the 12th to the 16th of July, once this is done, then the monies that have been ring-fenced for their payment for the exercise will duly be given to them.
What are the quality assurance measures that are being put in place to ensure that we get an accurate data? So that, I mean, there are some who have always argued, and even when it comes to GDP, they still believe that the economy is bigger than what we've estimated. What are some of those quality assurance measures that you put in place to avoid double counting? People want to, because of ethnic background, they want to give an impression that we are bigger than what you guys say, religious background and all the rest, to ensure that after this exercise, when we say that Ghana is 40 million, everybody will say that because you know what went into this thing is accurate.
Quite a number of interventions have been instituted to ensure that we get accurate data. I mean, to start with, for the first time, we are going into the census with some baseline information. Previous censuses relied on the demarcation exercise as the baseline information. But beyond that, because of technology, now we have access to satellite imagery, now we have access to building footprints. So ahead of the census, we have a sense of the distribution of the structures that we have in the country. So we're going into the data collection exercise with this baseline information. So assuming there's a structure that has a forest cover based on the satellite imagery, now as we speak, we know that there are some settlements in these areas. And these are places that we already have identified, and we're going to put our enumerators in there. So the first check that we've put in place is the baseline data that we have ahead of the data collection exercise. The use of technology also gives us a very robust approach in terms of the needed accuracy that we require to ensure that we don't have duplicates and we don't miss anybody. One of the things that we do with the use of tablets is that you predetermine some mistakes that are likely to occur. You are able to monitor the movement of the enumerators in the sense that we have an interactive map that if an enumerator is going beyond its defined enumeration area, it's going to prompt the enumerator. Even if the enumerator is to sync data from a different area other than his or her given area, is going to show us, because we're going to get a sense of where the data was synced to HQ. So this is what technology, just by the use of tablets, is bringing to us to ensure that we minimize these inaccuracies that characterizes the use of paper-based data collection. And also, for the first time in the census undertaking, we've instituted a data quality monitoring approach. In all the 272 districts, we are deploying data quality monitors, and what they need to do is, as the data trickle in real time, we check for inconsistencies, and once we do find them, we take them back. And don't forget that we don't just put enumerators in the field to collect data. Of the 51,916 enumeration areas, we've identified over 11,000 supervisory areas. So in addition to the enumerators, we have the supervisors. And what they do to ensure that the data is accurate are a number of things, including the re-interviews of some selected households. We check for inconsistencies, and then we follow up to ensure that the data that we collect is accurate.
But let's come to the bigger economy and what would be the impact of this. I know that you're getting a lot of data. Let's first come to the economy. What will be the impact of this data gathering on the larger economy? So we know the size of the population. We know that this is the level of education. We know the income levels and all the rest. What would this mean on the larger economy?
So, George, this is important in several respects. One respect is look at what the whole expenditure around the exercise is doing to smaller economies as far as the investment that is going into these smaller economies are concerned. I mean, in bigger settlements, that impact will be negligible, but in a lot of these smaller or very vulnerable or neglected areas, there's an activity that will more or less boost the local economy in several respects. Don't forget, it's an exercise that will ensure that everything that we do is at the local level. Recruitment and services is at the local level. So at the minimum, it will bring some vibrancy in very deprived economies. The second thing that I want to emphasize on is for us to think about the relationship between population growth and key economy-wide indicators, i.e. your GDP, i.e. your per capita GDP. At the very basic level, the basis of understanding our per capita GDP out of the big share of our GDP is to divide your GDP by your population. And over the past 10 years, we've been using projected population So now, once we do the census, we're going to get a real sense of our per capita GDP once we divide that by our GDP. This is an opportunity for us to reflect as a country what has happened over the past 60 years. When we did our census in 1960, when our population was around 6.7, our per capita GDP was around 183 US dollars. Currently, we're talking about our per capita GDP around 2,000, our per capita income around 2,300 with a population of 31.6 million. If you look at the growth in population, it is not consistent with our growth in per capita GDP. Our growth in population from 6.7 to 31.6 has gone up by about 5 times. And we cannot say the same for our per capita GDP in the sense that between 1984 and 2000, indeed we saw a dip in our per capita GDP until it shot up again between 2000 and 2010. So clearly it is about time we begin to think about the broad relationship between our population growth and our per capita GDP, a discussion that has dominated in the area of economics for some time. But I don't want to dwell so much on the first 2 points that I've talked about. I want to put emphasis on the census-derived data or indicators that are critical for our development. For the first time in census undertaking, we've come up with a resource advocacy document that showcases at least 100 ways by which we can use census data. And in all the areas that I've talked about, be it housing, which I want to put emphasis on, it's about time we begin to think about how the economy can grow with information on housing. How the economy can grow with information on sanitation. We have a whole module on economic activity. Unemployment, employment issues have dominated our discourses without credible data. Now this is an opportunity to say that we're going to get baseline information on employment and unemployment, and moving forward, what Ghana Statistical Service is doing is to use this as a frame to start engaging with a quarterly labor force survey, which would run, as the name is, 4 quarters in every year for at least a 2-3 year period. So for the first time, we're going to get information on unemployment based on the baseline, unemployment on quarterly basis, based on the baseline information that we are getting from the census.
So if I get it right, this will help us to get some accurate data on unemployment in this country and all those. But Prof, I think it will be a good time for us to take a short commercial break. I'll be getting more details on that one, and also about businesses as well. Why do they need this data? How will that aid in their planning? And also in terms of having a regional balance when it comes to employment. This is PM Express Business Edition. We'll take a short commercial break and we'll be right back. Welcome back to PM Express Business Edition as we talk about population and housing census, the economy and businesses. I have with me here government statistician Professor Samokomninim giving us an update on what should we expect census night and the census process and the economy. But Prof, we were talking about the bigger economy, and I also thought I should wrap up on the economy and talk about the business community as well, because I think this is very, very important as well. So again, how do we ensure that after all said and done, this is about the 100 and what questions I've seen. This is a sample of the questionnaire up here. And when you get the data, the required state institutions, they work with it. We cannot do guesswork again, but put in place policies based on data.
So prior to the data collection, George, what we've done is to engage all the ministries, departments, and agencies, as I indicated, on the 100 ways by which the census data will be used. We're going to do some contextual discussion, some engagement once the exercise is done. We've done a couple of census seminars on the results that we're going to get and the different analysis that the different users would want us to do out of that. So we've done prior to data collection engagement, and we are clear in our minds who would need what, how the data will be needed, and we're going to put this out there immediately the exercise is done. Let me jump to the issue of how businesses are going to benefit from this exercise.
But Prof, I get the assurance from you that you're going to make sure that with the support of our development partners, this data is used and used wisely.
You have that assurance, but I'll count on all other stakeholders, including the media, to help us to put out the data the way that the potential users will need it. I put it this way because oftentimes the data has been put out in a way that does not meet the requirements of the users. So it's more of a consultative engagement on what we have, what you need, in what format do we have to put it to increase the uptake of the data. So it's not only Ghana Statistical Service that is going to do that, but through the engagement that I've talked about and also with the support of media. Don't forget that we've already engaged media in the 3 ecological zones of the country, and moving forward we are sustaining that engagement. And all these concerns about phobia, about statistics, we want to minimize it to increase the uptake of the census data, and for that matter, all our statistical releases. So that assurance moving forward is there.
Prof, if I'm a business person, I mean, there are some, just like even inflation and all that, they'll say that, oh, this is a government thing. Why should I be interested in this whole thing they are doing?
It is important we approach this from the perspective that businesses do not operate in isolation. Businesses will operate based on where they can maximize their profit. Businesses would operate in areas where they have good information on the context in terms of not even how they're going to get more profit, even from the perspective of input, i.e. the caliber of labor that we have there, the caliber of educated people that we have there, the other social amenities that we have in there. So this census data is really very rich for businesses in the sense that before you go into an area, you have a good sense of the different structures that we have in the population, the characteristics of the population, and you can predetermine areas where your businesses are likely to thrive more than other areas. And I think with the GPS coordinates that we are collecting from the census undertaking, this is a very rich resource for businesses as far as their siting of businesses, factories are concerned.
So now post, Prof, post this census, if I'm a business person, a multinational, is the data going to, how do I get access to this data?
As part of our data sharing policy guided by both national and international standards, we put the data out there. Because of the volume of the data, we put just 1% of the data out there. But it's important to mention that a lot of businesses would require data that is customized to their need. And that is where it would require some discussions with Ghana Statistical Service on what type of data you need, how you want us to customize it in terms of the variables, whether you need the GPS coordinates, you need the uses of the structures, you need the population by sex, the population by education, the population by labor characteristics. So once you tell us the customization that we require to inform the decisions that you need to make, moving into a particular locality, that will be done to satisfy your needs.
Citing of industries, even pricing, even marketing and all the rest. This will basically be very, very critical. But Prof, again, so what do I need to do to make this process a success? A success where we get accurate data. What do I need to do? Me, George, what do I need to do? If I stay somewhere, airport, East Legon, what do I need to do?
That is what informed the 30-day countdown to the census that was launched by His Excellency the President, Nana Addo Dankwa Akufo-Addo, to achieve some of these objectives. One of which is to get persons in Ghana to be aware of their civic responsibilities. Data collection is a two-way affair. We get enumerators, go into residences, and we require respondents to cooperate with our enumerators for the right data to be collected. So it's our civic responsibility to ensure that the data that is required is given out. You can only do that if on the backdrop you appreciate the fact that the data is directly related to your own well-being. And this is why we do publicity, education, and advocacy to tell persons in Ghana that without accurate data, our well-being would either be jeopardized or would never see the light of the day. And at best, it can only be short-term. If you really want to see a transformation, then we require people to appreciate the direct relationship between the census exercise and their own well-being. And obviously, that relationship between the data collection and national development or transformation that we require. What we expect people to do is to keep in mind the key dates around the exercise. As we indicated, we're going to visit every structure at least twice for the chalking listing of structures and the actual enumeration starting from the 13th. 27/9, we are raising consciousness about that day so that people will relate all the questions, the counting to that day. They wouldn't use any reference point other than the 27/9. That is why we would have different activities across the country. So we are using this medium to emphasize the essence of 27 June 2021. And also what we expect from persons in Ghana is to familiarize themselves with the questions that we're going to ask. So we've developed a one-pager that summarizes the 127 questions in terms of the thematic areas and the questions that we're going to ask, so that once the enumerator approaches you and the data is being collected, within a short period of time, the exercise will be done. And this will take place between the 28th of June to the 11th of July 2021.
And are there any, so if I want to get in touch with you, if I have burden questions, how do I get that to you? Do I walk into your office or what? Or how do I do that?
Ahead of the census, we've developed different mechanisms by which we ensure an improved relationship between respondents and the census officials. Ahead of the census, we have our census website, census2021startsghana.gov.gh. If you go there, you have all the resources that you need to have in terms of the documentations, the processes, the contacts, and all that. We have that on our website. We've developed information sheets for different groups, the religious institutions, the educational institutions, one for the market, one for the general public, to ensure that people would appreciate the different channels by which they can reach out to us. More importantly is our social media that we have. And if you want to reach us on social media, it's at Ghana 2021 Census. You can reach us through our call center, and our telephone numbers are +233 591 147 6895. We have a toll-free number 0800 426 426. These are all mechanisms that we are putting in place to ensure that people can clear all misconceptions that they have. And also, when the exercise is ongoing, if there are challenges, you can reach out to our call center and would ensure that these concerns are addressed in near real time.
I know there's another thing you need to deal with, the misconceptions and your accounting, because government want to know the people who are not paying taxes and the religious factor and then the ethnic factor as well. But there's another, moving away from this just one bit before I come back as well. Some critical things are happening in the economy just over the last week, and I'm just asking that we've seen transport fares going up. What could be the possible impact on inflation? Is it going to be minimal or much ado about nothing?
George, as you know, at Statistical Service, as much as possible when it comes to these key statistics, we try to move away from projections simply because we appreciate the fact that several factors would influence the final value final statistics that you're going to get out of the estimation. So yes, transport fares have gone up.
Going to go up, sorry.
One would expect that it would affect inflation, but we don't know how the other variables are going to play out. Don't forget that we have the food and the non-food component influencing inflation, the final figure. The weight on food is always impacting because it's about 45% of the basket, and with all the other non-food taking the other percentage. So we are always hesitant in saying that definitely there's going to be a variation, an upward variation for that matter, in inflation as a result of an upward change in transport fares.
And I also look at minimum wage also going up as well. Would all these cause any shifts? Not the exact numbers, but would that impact as well?
It would definitely cause some shifts, but as to whether the net value would cause, the net value would show that it's moved this way or the other, depends on the relative impact of all these other factors.
Prof, in 30 seconds, final words to Ghanaians out there as you all wait up to this census night. 30 seconds, Prof.
Thank you very much, George. We say to all persons in Ghana that data that you're going to give to Ghana Statistical Service would be strictly confidential. We're going to deploy the needed demands that we have to ensure that data that you are giving out there is protected, and we're going to go strictly by that. And also, as I indicated, it's our civic responsibility to provide the right data, and that data would only be at the aggregated level. The data would never be at the individual level. It is protected, and the only reason why we are doing that is for our own development and, for that matter, national development.
Prophet, thank you so much for your time. And I believe we're doing a part 2 of this, maybe census tonight or maybe after the accounting exercise. So, Prophet, thank you so much for your time and had very tight schedule, but you made time for us. I do appreciate it so much, Prof. And that's all for PM Express Business Edition as we talked about the counting the population, the impact on the economy and businesses. Listen, you need this data than ever before. Your pricing, your marketing, location of industries as well. Well, you need it. That's all for PM Express Business Edition. Have a great day.